If you're someone that has anxiety and you're kind of struggling to comprehend it, because on paper, there's not that many reasons why you should allow yourself. You're privileged, you've got family, you've got people around you that love and care for you. You've got so much going on for you that it doesn't quite make sense how chronic your anxiety is. Actually, when you stop and allow yourself a moment to indulge in it, it's a bit embarrassing. That's how I would feel like, oh, how can I feel so anxious when I've got so much to be grateful for and I've got so much good stuff going on? And that would just add to the anxious cycle because then I'd feel worse about myself as a person and it would just snowball. Having answers and having clarity is something that the brain likes. So I hope at the end of this today, you're going to feel like, you can breathe a sigh of relief because that relief, I always find when you can exhale fully, it gives you space to fill up with more of the stuff that you want. So I'm really hopeful that by the end of today, if you are somebody that you're like, I don't get how I've got so much going on in my life that's good. How have I got anxiety this bad? This is going to be a really helpful use of your time. So join me today as we explore. And I want to start by saying this is my perception. I live a very privileged life and I'm very aware of that. This is for people who are looking out into the world and they're like, I don't get it. Because the people that I see, and I'm like a little detective in my life all of the time, the people that I see that are struggling with anxiety and have it the worst, it comes down to these things. And it's not the god awful parents or god awful experiences that we all to varying degrees go through as a human. Nobody is getting out of here alive. Being a human is rough and it is tricky, and it isn't. You would expect the most anxious people to be those people who have endured the most god awful parents and endured the most god awful experiences. But in my, like, I'm looking for the common denominators. Yes, those people exist, but in the main, they're not chronically anxious people. And this is spanning through my 12-year teaching career and into my coaching, the last 4 or 5 years of coaching. What I see is they have parents that do two things. One is really important. We have to all experience the first thing to make it out alive, like to get to the end of it all. And the people that I see with anxious tendencies, their parents do number one really pretty well, but they do thing number two pretty chronically. And that is what this combination leads to horrible levels of anxiety. And as a parent, I believe when you're thinking about anxiety, I'm like, you've got two jobs. No, I am a parent. I am a parent of twins. Like when you're a parent, you have a gazillion jobs and you're never going to become the master of it. That's what I struggle to make peace with every single day. As a parent, choosing these little lives to bring into the world, it is an impossibility to get all of this right. What even is right? I've got two who I had at the same time, and they need completely different things. But there is this common denominator of these, when we're thinking about anxiety, these two things. So, number one is to love our children, to love you. That's your parents' number one job. Number one was to love you. And a lot of the people who have horrendous anxieties didn't struggle there. They had people who thought they were great in the main. They had people around them that loved them and thought they were brilliant. And you might be here being the anomaly, being like, well, that's not true for me. I'm not saying this is your experience. I'm saying this is what I am seeing, my own experience and what I see on the daily as I'm looking around the people around me. If it's not you, that's okay, but they are loved, they are well loved, they are well treated. They have people that just want the best for their babies. They want to go out of their way. They know what pain, they've been a human for longer than we have. They know the pains of this existence, and they came and were raised by people of a generation, especially if you're in the Western world, that we went through a world war. My grandparents went through rationing. My grandpa, he was in World War II. Like, my parents were raised by those people. So there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of rationing, there was a lot of, and they didn't receive this abundance of love. They weren't protected in the ways that children get to be protected. So what do? We bounce to the other extreme. And a lot of our parents indulged us in love, told us how brilliant we were, loved us so hard, and if that isn't you, you'll be like, oh, that sounds like a horrible problem. It's not. Every child deserves that. And it makes me emotional thinking about how much I love my children. But we all need that. But anxious people, their parents do that really well in the main. But the second thing, and this is the bit that most anxious people parent got chronically wrong and continue to get chronically wrong. It's this illusion that that love and care and cotton wool wrapping is gonna just be this standard procedure in life, because most people, anxious people's parents love them so hard and want to protect them from the bizarreness of this world. They get consumed in that. They get consumed and they get wrapped up in that, and they do such a good job that these people get into adulthood and they're like, where's the cotton wool? Like, quite often, and it's helpful to see these parents as being like a magic wand. For so many anxious people, the parents don't want their children to feel pain, because you don't. I'm a parent, like, I get it. You don't want your babies to be in pain. You don't want to see them upset. You don't want to see them hurt. And that's a lot of what being a human is about. So we swoop in. It's the natural mother's instinct, especially, to swoop in and just get rid of that painful stuff. And you can do it when you're children. Recently I've got a caravan that I've converted. If you're curious about my journey of converting the caravan, I share so much of it on Instagram and More Than This by Emma Upton, so please come and join me there. And we were at this caravan park, and we made sure we went to somewhere that was just off our main road. It was my first time towing a caravan. I was challenging myself outside of my comfort zone. I was using my own advice and I was living by my own values. And I just wanted to get off a main road and into where we were staying. So that was our choice of location. And it was a busy, big place. And it was very cool. It was very commercial. It was full of families with loads of kids. And there was this really cool park in the center of it. And there were no adults, like, which is bizarre, isn't it? Like, my husband and I were pretty much the only adults there. And there were these babies, I'd say 4, from about 4 years old up to like teenagers who were wandering around with alcohol, and like, it was a real span. And this park was outside of my comfort zone, to say the least. My kids bloody loved it. They were like, it was like a lighthouse. And there were just these gnats in the night just flying towards the light, like, oh, can we go to the park? Because it was so different to what we are used to. And the mom in me wanted to be like, no, we're not going there where everybody's using the M word and the C word, and like, no, I don't want that. And they wanted to go there. And so this is where number 2 comes in. And this is where anxious people's parents fall down. They said no. They went with their brain and their protectiveness, and they said, no, I don't want to take you to that park, that I'm going to have to navigate and deal with all of that stuff, and you're going to have to navigate and deal with all of that stuff. And it just, no. Anxious people come from parents who don't want to put themselves in those difficult situations to figure it out. I was figuring stuff out the same way that they were figuring stuff out. Like, Rupert very quickly learned how big boys work because he broke like a rule in the game, and the big boy didn't really say anything, but then he made sure that he was ostracized in the next game. My heart as a mom, I was like, ugh. But it's all learning, isn't it? And that's where our parents did us a disservice, because they didn't want to watch us in that pain, watching Rupert's little heartbreak because he was with the big boys and he was playing and then he was out because he didn't. And then the fallout of that, and then we have to deal with the dramatics of it all, and the fallout and the upset and the tantrums and everything that comes from it. It's a lot when you're navigating your other bajillion jobs as a parent. But this is a common thing that I see in all anxious people that I see. Maybe I just attract more people like me. We are not gifted the opportunities to navigate our brain and not believe it. So in that moment, if we take my example that I didn't even know I was going to use as an example, but here we are. If we take that moment on the park where Rupert was actively rejected out of that game, what we want to do is pacify and make it better. Well, what we want to do is not go to the park anyway. Let's just stay in our little caravan with the four of us where we all know each other pretty well. Let's just stay in this insular box. That's what my brain wants to do. But expanding out of that, all of a sudden we've got these different dynamics going on, and you want to put a plaster on it. Oh, that boy is being mean, da 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 da. Like, and what actually we're being, because Rupert's brain was like, I'm not good enough then. I'm not good enough. I'm not a good friend. Like, that's where the brain wants to go, isn't it? All the reasons why you suck and why you're not good enough and why you're undeserving, because that's the nature of the brain. It's not because there's something wrong with you or there's something wrong with me. That is the literal nature of the human brain. It wants to go to those spaces where we don't feel good enough. And what our parents' job is to help facilitate seeing the bigger picture of that, to allow us to go into those challenging situations and be able to say, look, your brain was acting up here. Did you catch it? Did you catch where your brain started to go off on one and started to create stories? And did you see how you wanted to believe it and you wanted to go, when actually, when we strip it all back, the reality was you didn't match the rules of the game. And the big boy didn't want to call you out on that, but he showed you very clearly by making sure you weren't part of the next game. Do you see that? Oh, okay. And then all of a sudden, his brain now doesn't think he sucks, doesn't think that he's not good enough, doesn't think that he should be ostracized from the world, which is where the brain wants to go. Like my brain wants to go there all of the time. Actually, he's like, oh, okay, well, that kind of makes sense because it was no tag backs in 20 seconds. That was the rule. And he did a tig back to a big boy and it was way under the 20 seconds. And the big boy was like, they're against the rules. And he was like, it wasn't 20 seconds. It was well under. Rupert figured out that that was the problem. And then he had something to work with, like, okay, I don't suck. It's just I didn't understand that dynamic. And now I've got that to take away and work with. Can you see how if we'd have stayed at the caravan in our nice little bubble of all of us that just love and understand each other pretty well now after spending the last 9 years together, and Wade and I have spent 23 years together, that's so much simpler, but that's not the real world. That's not how the world works. The world is this dynamic, ever moving, always confusing situation that just rolls at us all of the time. And it's a lot to keep up with. So it makes sense, like, to go back and be in that space and to regroup and then to go back out into the world and do it. It's not just the firing squad all of the time. That would be horrible. But if your parents didn't show you that pushing yourself and going into those situations that are going to be uncomfortable actually have something to teach you and something to learn that you can take away, and it doesn't mean that you're rubbish. You can't have anxiety when you work like that, because anxiety lives in the nuances and the gaps, and the brain always wants to figure things out. So the brain does the maths very quickly, and the maths is always Francis's judgment of, you're rubbish, nobody likes you, you should be embarrassed, you should be ashamed of yourself, you should be all of those things, when actually hardly ever is that true. There will just be something to take within that whole parameter of that experience that you're meant to take away and you're meant to use as a lesson and use as learning and use as fuel, so that you can ever expand into the next. So the next time, God bless Rupert and this experience, I didn't know that this was going to be so helpful here. The next time he goes into that environment where there is, because my brain, let me say what I would have done. I wouldn't have wanted to go in that park for toffee. My mum used to say that if we walked past the park that we'd go to and there were big kids in it, I'd just be mortified. Like, they'd be running up the slide and I'd be like, oh my God, they're running up the slide. I wouldn't be in that park for one. Like, my anxieties came when I came out of utero. So I wouldn't even want to be in that park. And if I fell and banged my head and somehow ended up in that horror show for me as a kid, And that situation happened, and I did a TIG back, and it was less than a 20-second, and a big kid like called me out on it. You could write me off for the rest of that holiday. Like, bye, I'm just gonna go and sit in a dark hole until it's time to go back to my safe place, which is my actual home, and I won't be coming out again. Thank you very much. Like, that would be my experience. I wouldn't even consider that, oh, you just didn't understand this social cue because I'm autistic. Like, I don't get social cues. You miss this social cue that's sitting underneath everything. Like, see that more readily and you'll be good. Like, they wanted to play with you, they were having fun, it was a cool experience. It's just this one little thing that you get to tweak, and it doesn't mean that you're terrible, and that even though your brain wants to go there, that would not have been me. And that's why I'm in there doing the work with my kids now. Like, it was scary, but you know what? Just as an aside, my husband, who wouldn't admit it, but I think he equally felt that he went to a way rougher school, primary school, than I did on the council estate. Like, he's got a bit more of those skills. He was navigating a football team with all ages and all spans, and he had subs, and he was calling people in and calling people out. And I had a big band of them all sitting with their shoes and socks off, coming and talking to me. I had the ringleader, the boy that was just sat on the slide, like swearing at everybody, trying to give me sweets, trying to give me this plushy thing that he'd got, like chatting away to me. He didn't care, of course. Like, there's a lot of stuff to. So it works. Getting outside of the comfort of what your anxious brain wants to tell you as truth. And this isn't just if your parents didn't do this, because most of our parents didn't do this. Most of our parents didn't even know that this kind of expansive work existed for us. We're the kind of first generation of people really having wide access to podcasts and teachers and books. Like, my whole house, or this room, my bedroom, is just filled floor to ceiling with books upon books upon books upon books, because there's this wealth of knowledge that we get to teach ourselves this. So if your parents didn't teach this to you, it is unsurprising to me. They didn't know. And you have been called here to do this for yourself. And if you are a parent, like, my babies were the primary motivation for me. They got to about 3 years old, and I'm like, I am not doing a good job of this. I need to figure this out quick. And so we get to do it now. So if you're saying, yes, I was loved and my anxiety doesn't make sense, but actually when you're reliving and relaying this to me, it kind of makes sense now. No, I was never challenged out of my comfort zone. I was never given the opportunities to alchemize those tricky things that happened to me so that I could make them into the gold and the gems, and be like, I'm going to take this gold and this gem with me to my next experience that's similar, and I'm going to watch myself expand, and that's going to feel really good. So I'm going to keep pushing myself and keep feeling difficult and keep feeling awkward, but going at it anyway, because I know I'm going to learn and grow through it. You didn't have parents that did that. You are like 99% of the world. But if you are somebody who's got this far into this podcast and you're like, this sounds good, this sounds helpful, this sounds like something that I want to do, there is no time like now. I am reparenting myself right now. My anxieties are so minuscule that a lot of the time I can literally, it blows my mind that I can literally be free. And if I'm not, and if I'm in a moment like this morning, dropping my babies off at school because they've been with me for 6 weeks and now they're not, like, I could feel that anxious feeling wanting to come in. I know what to do with it now. But we have to grant ourselves access to those points. We have to grant ourselves an opening to that. And that opening, I hope you've received here today, be like, okay, it makes sense why I have got such chronic anxieties, because everything felt like the end of the world, and I was never encouraged to see it as anything other than that. And I built up this evidence bank that the brain's always looking for as to why I suck and I should go in and insular on myself and on my life. That is the nature of the brain. It is going to do it every single day of our lives, every minute, every second, every minute, every day of our entire lives, unless we're willing to challenge it. Like, and if you didn't have and don't have the grown-ups around you when you were small, there is a plethora of resources now to be able to do it. And if this is right up your street, if what I'm singing about here, and maybe you're finding me for the first time, welcome to my world, because this is literally what I spend my life doing. I'm obsessed with it and I blooming love it. So if you're here for the first time, welcome. If you are somebody you're like, yes, Emma, you're singing, like, this is the reminder I needed. I'm going to go out, I'm going to figure out where I can find the gold and alchemize that, then let's go, because that's my life every single day. Thank you for being here. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope it's been helpful. If there has been any insights that have popped up for you, please share. Please let me know. I love co-creating. It's my favorite thing, hearing you be like, yes, and what about this? And what about this? Like, yes. Have the best day. Much love.